Hi, everyone. I'm Ashleigh Lovelace. I'm the sponsored content editor at Chronogram Media. And today's session is going to be how to maximize your native content investment. So I see a lot of familiar names and also some new ones. So welcome and thank you to all of you for attending. All right, so on today's agenda, we're going to be talking about native content, what it is, what successful native content looks like, and pitfalls to avoid, how to develop and promote the native content you create with a publisher like Chronogram Media, and how you can continue to see rewards from that same content in the future. So no matter where you are in the process, this session should really help you better think about your brand as a content gold mine. Whether you're a real estate company or a performing arts organization, we all know that your expertise and lies much deeper than just that single transaction between you and your audience that often happens. As I'll talk through later, this is really the sweet spot for your brand when developing content. How do you access that sort of deeper level connection and, thinking about your expertise and who you are as a brand and who you want to stand for. So native content at Chronogram Media. We have a lot of channels. As I'm sure most of you know, Chronogram Media is a Hudson Valley based media company. We have over 25 years of experience creating and publishing magazines, creating custom publications, and obviously also a whole suite of marketing and advertising services that range from ad design to website creation and more. Native content plugs into most of our publication channels. So in addition to our flagship arts and culture publication, which is Chronogram, and a lot of you I'm sure are familiar with it, we have our home and shelter magazine, Upstate House, our tourism guide, Explore the Hudson Valley. Those all have native opportunities. They have native content in them. They look like they come in the form of print articles that also live online and receive a month-long social media campaign to promote that content. Of course, we also have, other channels, like we have a news-based outlet called the River Newsroom, which we don't do native content for. And, we do some individual sort of custom publications or special projects like the Clean Power Guide, which is part of our Upstate House issue. So we do a lot of different things in a lot of different places. We also, in our sort of digital only channels, the River is one of our digital only channels, but in addition, there's upstater.com, which has a focus on Hudson Valley visitors and new residents, and then Rural Intelligence, which covers the Western Hudson Valley and into the Berkshires. So native content for these channels lives online and is distributed through our email newsletters. So for those digital channels like Rural Intelligence, chronogram.com, upstatehouse.com, and upstater.com, we work to distribute through our email newsletters. And those email newsletters are the Eat, Play, Stay newsletter, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and the Rural Intelligence email. In addition to our sort of owned and operated channels, we also work with a partner called It's on Target to do targeted displays and email campaigns that we can really, hyper target to audience demographics that you want to reach. So it sort of takes our audience and then expands that even more. And then we also have our social media channels for Chronogram, Upstater, and Upstate House, where we distribute native content. Of course, a lot of great organic content as well. So yeah, let's get into it. What is native content? So brands historically have had certain channels for communicating with their desired audience. You put a display ad in a magazine, you make a TV or a radio ad, you can send out press releases. All these are trying to reach an audience who will hopefully come to you at some point for what you do, be that your products or services or, what you do. But all these traditional channels have their limitations. People are used to being advertised to. They are so used to it that there is a whole term to refer to their ability to tune it out. It's called banner blindness. So when you combine the need to do more than just advertise in traditional channels with the desire to really still be able to communicate the value of everything that you're doing, you get new forms of marketing and advertising that can achieve both. This is where content comes in. So there's a slight distinction here that I should take a moment to explain between native content and content marketing. These terms are thrown around a lot, but content marketing is sort of the larger bucket of marketing that lives through content. And then it's sort of also broadly used to describe content that a brand creates and distributes on its own. So in contrast to that is native content, which is any type of content that's produced by a media company. So like Chronogram Media or the New York Times, Food Network, any sort of major brand that you can think of, any major publisher often does native content. And they do that in collaboration with a brand whose desired audience is that media company's bread and butter. So that's why native content really works. As a brand, you're then able to tap into that. You're able to tap into that network and to reach the reader where they are. So brands are often used to communicating with a customer persona, and then this is the reader persona. So basically the reader is someone who's really interested in content, just in general. The reader is driven by curiosity, the desire to be entertained, informed, enlightened. And the key is that they already trust the publications they read, like Chronogram, like the New York Times, like Vox. So they trust them to provide them with meaningful content. And that is where the brand part comes in. So in this slide, you'll see two examples. One is a 1959 issue of a magazine called The Furrow, which is still published today by the John Deere Tractor Company. And the other is a recent article from the magazine Travel and Leisure, which they did in partnership with Visit Scotland, which is a tourism agency. So both of these pieces of content seek to go deeper than that transactional level, that customer level that brands are often used to interacting on. So, excuse me, here we're moving from that transactional moment of buy a tractor to here's a story about a farmer and what he does to prep his fields after harvest in the fall, or Visit Scotland, full stop, that's all you need to know, to here's a story about a beautiful travel log of this island in Scotland that most people don't even think about traveling to. Both of these are examples of robust content that have the ability to capture readers' attention. So, continuing on this theme, what does native content look like today? Many major publishers, as I've already mentioned, create native content. The New York Times does native content, Vox does native content, Bloomberg, The Guardian, Martha Stewart Living, Saveur Magazine, and of course, us. So they all produce native content. They take the sort of editorial prowess that their publications are known for, and they find the best, most interesting ways forward with what a brand is sort of looking to offer and trying to communicate. So you'll see it in magazines, online, on social media. It can look like an article, it'll look like a video, it can be a micro website, it can be just a simple social media post. It really spans the gamut of a lot of different ways that readers can interact with the content. So many brands work with publishers to create content as part of a tentpole campaign, which is a marketing term for associated marketing activities that provide a sort of halo effect on either side for a primary goal of a campaign, like launching an event, marketing to a new customer base, changing your business model, or even just rebranding. So the example on the slide here is from the New York Times in collaboration with Netflix's Orange is the New Black, which I'm sure a lot of us have seen and enjoyed. While the main marketing objective for Netflix might be to get Orange is the New Black just back on people's minds and then on their streaming devices, Netflix really backed up. They chose an accessory goal of educating people about the prison system, because ultimately that's the goal of the show and the book that the show is based on, that it sheds light on the US prison system and highlight the need for reform. So you may be asking yourself, like, why would Netflix want to do this? So that brings us to our next question, which is what makes successful native content? Like, why does it work? What does it do? So I like to break it down as sort of three simple elements, which you'll see listed here. One is that it feels authentic. The messaging doesn't feel overly manicured or overly branded. The content is meaningful for the reader, is the second one. Do they gain something from interacting with the content, is a question I often ask myself. Did they learn something by interacting with the content? Did the content shift their opinion about a previously held view? Does it help them in their day-to-day life? If so, that content is meaningful, it's helpful. And then the third is the content focused on a long-term goal? So this is especially important for brands who are thinking about doing native content, because you have to put yourself in the mindset of, are you asking the reader to take an immediate action, or are you allowing them to experience the content, to experience your brand halo effect, to mull on the content, and then trust that they'll come back later when it serves them at the right time? So if you think about the New York Times, Netflix example with Orange is the New Black, Netflix stepped back from that sort of primary transactional role as a streaming device, or as a streaming service. So they spend a lot of time, obviously, looking for new subscribers, holding on to their existing subscribers. And that's really important. That's obviously a key part of their operations. But when it comes to content, they really, taking that step back might not gain them immediate subscribers in the short term. But what it does is sort of a big picture goal, which is it associates Netflix with progressive ideas, progressive conversations, which is a choice. It's an active choice that the brand folks at Netflix made. And that association can then translate to goodwill towards Netflix as a brand for anyone that interacts with this content. So they're sort of taking that moment to trust that investing in this content will pay off, because it's going to associate all these good feelings with the reader, that the reader doesn't feel actively marketed to right in that moment necessarily. Obviously, there are, strong marketing elements, that it's branded for Netflix, it talks about their show and everything like that, but it sort of moves past those immediate concerns. So next slide. Gonna take a drink of water. All right, so that brings us to translating those elements of success into actionable best practices. So as I'm sure you've already picked up on, native content is a bit of a paradigm shift from banner or print display advertising, where you're mostly often looking to communicate what your brand needs first and foremost. But think about your day-to-day operations. In business, we always say the customer is always right, right? So with native content, it's your audience who is always right. Everything starts with your audience. So the first thing is identify who you think you want to reach. Ask yourself questions like, who am I not currently reaching? Who am I hoping to reach? Who is my audience? Who are the people who want to learn more about me? Who do I want those people to be? And that's often aspirational, and that's okay. It's totally fine to not 100% know the answer to that question, but that's definitely where this sort of can begin, is thinking about, who am I really talking to? Like, am I talking to the same person that I think I'm talking to all the time? Do I actually know who I'm talking to with my advertising? So start there. And then once you're sort of percolating in that, about who you want to reach, really focus on them, and then just let go a little. I mentioned earlier the reader persona and the customer persona, and obviously those two personas exist within the same person. They exist within all of us. But the reader persona can shift back into the customer persona very quickly in like a split second. So, and that's not always a good thing. So if a reader recognizes that your content is signaling to them that they're being looked at as a customer only, they may tune your message out. And that's obviously not, that's the exact opposite of what you want to do. So this right here is why brands partner with publishers to create native content. Publishers are expert in audience development. At Chronogram Media, we spend all day thinking about what kind of content our audience wants to see and what information they need to know. We live it, we breathe it. And so that's where that sort of nice synergy can come into play, is that the brand has ideas, goals, you have goals for your business, what you want to achieve. And then the publisher's strength is, I know what a reader's really going to enjoy reading. And then when you combine the two, you can get really fun and playful content that achieves both of those goals. So continuing on with best practices. When thinking about what areas you could possibly talk about, what content you could talk about, call on your expertise as a specialist. Think about what makes you different. As you can see here, there are so many different areas to go hunting for content. When you're equipped to bring all of that inspiration to a publisher, I can definitely say from personal experience that they will be able to much more quickly find a compelling story. So everything is a story if you think about it. You know, your brand's history, what you think about your industry, what trends are going on in your industry, and how you're different from the average. You know, connections that you have, local partnerships. Are you partnering with another organization to do something? That's a great way to start mining. Like, what are you doing together? What concepts are you trying to build on together? What are you trying to achieve? And then thinking about that as a big picture. You know, are you working on sustainability? And is that like your sort of big picture goal? That's a great area for content. And yeah, so with all of these things, it's really just thinking as broadly as possible as you can about what the potential is. You know, there's a lot of goals, obviously, about what you want to achieve right now. And when it comes to developing content, it's really nice to keep it sort of open and really be open to experimenting. That's when some of the most fun content comes out. So now I'll show you some examples. So in thinking about all of these examples, think back to those three elements that I mentioned earlier, like authenticity, meaningful experience, future focused. Those three tenets really work well when you're thinking about whether or not native content is working. So our first example is from Allbirds, which is a shoe company, and T-Brand Studio, which is the New York Times content development arm. So Allbirds is a B Corp. So they have a mission to provide sustainable footwear. It's made from eucalyptus tree fiber. So that's like a big part of their brand. You know, it's like a lot of people may just see Allbirds and think, oh, those are cute shoes. I'd like those shoes. But, you know, like Patagonia, like a lot of these other brands that are sort of trying to achieve something in addition to selling their products, you know, Allbirds sort of wants to stand for something more. So when thinking about native content for them, it might have been tempting to just talk about what goes into their shoe design. It's made with eucalyptus tree fiber. That's pretty cool. That could be, I'm sure that could be an article in itself, and that could be interesting. But here, they really stepped outside of that, again, that transactional moment. And they worked with the New York Times T-Brand Studio to really take a stand in the fight against climate change. So this piece that they did with the New York Times really dives into a narrative on the risks of climate change to various birds' habitats. So there's this really nice, cute tie-in with all birds. It sort of keeps all birds on your brain in a nice way. And then they also, as at the same time as this piece was being circulated in, New York Times channels, Allbirds also released a limited edition shoe as part of this campaign. So together, the release of the shoe and the native campaign could easily be seen as part of the same tentpole campaign for the shoe release. But the beautiful thing is that someone could interact with this content and not even necessarily realize that there is a new shoe release. And they still learned something. They still really, identified Allbirds as being a brand that stood for sustainability. And at the end of the day, that is a long-term win for Allbirds, because that's what they want people to think of them as. When people who want to buy sustainable clothing need to buy their next pair of shoes, Allbirds wants them to be who they're thinking about in the future. So our next example is one of our own. So this is Chronogram Media with Woodstock and Kingston-based Halter Associates Realty. Halter is a go-to name in local real estate. And with this piece of content, which appeared in last October's Chronogram magazine, we worked together with Lisa to give readers something they love. Readers love travel and tourism content. Even people who have lived here for a really long time love reading about, where's the place that I should hit up on my next time I go hiking, So this really took advantage of the fact that October is kind of peak foliage season. It's really gorgeous in the Catskills. And Lisa herself, has lived in and around the Route 28 corridor for a long time. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to just share like some of your must-hit spots? So, we talked about Fruition, we talked about Fabulous Furniture, we talked about the rail trail. And those are things that people just want to know about. They want to know more about what they can do and visit. And this was done in sort of a succinct roundup style way. So this article is a good example of giving the reading something meaningful right there in that moment when they're reading. So it gives them ideas on where to stop, what to do, where to go. But it also works on the level of giving a trust or around Lisa Halter and her real estate agency as a local name. So as a real estate agency, Lisa and her team are experts on the area. So this article works to communicate that they're experts in the area. They are literally tasked with helping people navigate the process and buying and selling a home, finding areas that fit with their personality. So an article that sort of reinforces the idea that Lisa is someone who really does know the area and is committed to, our region creates that nice trust aura. And as you can see from the images below, this piece appeared in print in Chronogram. It went online on chronogram.com. And then the one on the right is its 30-day social media campaign, where essentially it's distributed through Facebook and Instagram to sort of distribute the content to as wide of an audience as possible. All right, so video content, also very fun. This was a collaboration between Mini Cooper dealership in Madison, Wisconsin, and then Isthmus, which is a regional magazine in the area. So as you'll see in the video, it's very comedians in cars getting coffee. If anyone has seen that Jerry Seinfeld show that was around for a while, I don't know if it's still on. It's just two chefs driving around Wisconsin in a Mini Cooper, and they're just kind of chatting about how one of them came to open their restaurant. So we'll watch a little bit of this.
So that's a yucca.
Sure it is.
The starch, you'll prepare it like a potato.
I will I?
Well.
Hi, I'm David Rodriguez, your host, and welcome to Car to Table, episode 23. We are here at the Green Owl to pick up Chef Jenny Capolero. Jenny.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Good to see you. Welcome to Car to Table.
Thank you.
I know that our hosts are very hungry, before we go, what are you bringing?
I brought some garlic that was raised by my good friends, Jim and Marina. They're very good gardeners. I just brought some porcini powder just in case.
All right.
And some nutritional yeast, which is used a lot in vegetarian cooking, and a little bit of salt and some bouillon cubes.
Awesome. Our countrymen await, so let's get out of here.
Sounds good.
The only thing mini about the Mini Countryman is the $298 a month starting leases that you can get. Other than that, I'm 6'1" and 250, and I fit in it just fine. You should be able to fit your family of 4 and all the groceries that I just loaded.
So Green Owl's been around for a long time.
Yeah, 9 years.
How did you get started in cooking?
I'm not professionally trained, which I'd like everyone to know that. I just come from a family that were obsessed with food. I became a vegetarian in my early 20s, and I lived a couple other places, but mostly in Madison. And just by necessity, I just taught myself to do vegetarian cooking.
Where else did you live?
I lived in San Francisco for a year, New York, Mexico for a little bit. After high school, I was an exchange student in Istanbul
Oh, that's really cool.
for 6 months. Yeah, that was great. And then I took several years off. Well, I took 3 years off before I started college and came home, earned some money after Istanbul, and then went and traveled in Europe for 6 months.
Would you?
All right. So as you can see, this obviously there is a moment in there in which Mini Cooper is very prominently featured, but most of the content is not about them at all. Obviously, they are riding around in a Mini Cooper, and it really features the car a lot. But it's really about the chefs talking. You know, it's about them exploring her background and her restaurant. And you know, all I can say is if this were a Hudson Valley restaurant that we were talking about, I think people would really love to see it. You know, it's like, we love our restaurants here, obviously. You know, they have so much to offer and they add so much to our regional landscape. And they all have personalities, and they all have personalities working behind them. And so it's just great to have that moment where those personalities can really, you know, live out in the public in a way that is not normally done. So in this example, Mini Cooper of Madison really just took the opportunity to say, like, yeah, we support that. That's an awesome thing. Everyone wants to learn about the chefs in our region. And it really, again, it just sort of reinforces the brand halo effect of them really supporting local. So
that's a yucca.
Sure it
I'm
is.
not gonna make us all watch this again. All right, so our next example is again another Chronogram Media, this time with Williams Lumber and Home Centers, which is a really widely known regional name in home improvement. This piece appeared in last fall's Upstate House magazine. It went on upstatehouse.com, and it received a social media campaign that promoted that content. So one of Williams Lumber's big points as a brand is that they put a real priority on education. All their associates at their stores are very knowledgeable about the products they sell. And one of those products is Benjamin Moore paint. So this piece coincided with Benjamin Moore's announcement of their color of the year, which for 2021 was Aegean blue. Really pretty name, pretty bold color. It can obviously, you know, sort of span the gamut of classic to quite bold and modern. But as someone whose house is painted mostly white on the inside, it's a bit of a leap for some people, you know, and not everyone's ready to make that jump. So to sort of really support that discussion of this really kind of bold, beautiful color, we came up with this content piece about how to bring a bold interior paint color choice into your home, how to incorporate it in different areas where it won't feel so bold necessarily, you know, finding accent moments, thinking of bathrooms, you know, thinking of moments in the kitchen like cabinets. And then also, you know, taking a moment to educate people about things like gloss levels and like what's the difference between a matte paint and a gloss paint, and what will that do if I choose a bold paint color in a gloss versus a bold paint color in a matte. And so really just taking the time to sort of educate people on things like that. And again, this is information that is useful to them at any time. You know, they aren't necessarily going to run out to Williams in that moment and get Benjamin Moore, but the hope is that in the future, when they do want to take on a painting project, that they'll think of Benjamin Moore and they'll probably think of Williams. So our last example is from the Daily Beast, which is an online publication in collaboration with HBO Max, which is a film called An American Pickle. And so the movie stars Seth Rogen as a struggling laborer who immigrates to America in the early 1900s, and he wants to, you know, build a better life. And then one day he's working at his factory job and he falls into a vat of pickles and he's brined for 100 years. And then he wakes up, he meets his great grandson, and hilarity ensues. So this piece of native content acts as an accessory to the film's launch. It dives into the real facts behind the film's pretty funny premise. And what it's nice about it is that it's interactive. You know, at every age here that you can see, you can flip between the now and then button. So you can flip back and forth to see the differences between growing up in the US at the turn of the 20th century versus today. So it's fun, it's lighthearted, it's interactive, and ultimately you walk away having probably learned some stuff that you might not have thought about in a very long time since being in a history class. So that's, you know, really one of the hallmarks of good internet content is, are you engaging with it? So the piece does, of course, encourage you to go see the film or go stream the film. But since the content arc of this native content is really so closely aligned with the film itself, it doesn't feel super abrupt. And that's a real nuance that really happens on a case-by-case basis. You know, obviously there are moments where it doesn't make sense to sort of say, go here, buy this now. But sometimes there are moments where it's like, this is in support of something else that is going on with the brand, and it makes sense to then tie it in. So this brings us to our next. What happens after publication? How do you, you know, really take advantage of long-term rewards? So basically, you as a brand, when you're creating native content with a publisher, you should use and distribute that content in the future. Often when working on content, I try to make sure that the content is as evergreen as possible so that it is sort of as useful to the brand as possible for as long as possible. That also helps with sort of discoverability. If people are looking online for content and your content is, you know, more evergreen than it is topical, then your name is sort of just going to keep coming back up. Also, excuse me, treat your custom created or native content like you would any other publicity. Share it on your social media, share it, you know, share it with your customer base. You know, it is something that you participated in, but there's a really nice synergy in that, especially with, you know, what we're working on, which is most often regional brands. So we're a regional publisher working with regional brands, and it works really well together. You know, there are really nice sort of brand effects for both sides of working together. So share it. Don't be afraid to share it, and encourage people to interact with it, give you feedback, and use it as yet another point in your sort of marketing efforts. And then so thinking about like how to actually do that. How do you actually go about, you know, getting out into the world, and how you can sort of tap onto the process after publication. You know, you can print out copies of your native pieces or digital articles. You can distribute them to people. You can create a blog post on your own website and then link to that content. Really just find ways to incorporate it in your digital properties as well, because discoverability is so important. And obviously on the publisher side, we have all of our channels that we use to help people discover, but there is also still that back and forth that go along with your audience that you have access to is, might not necessarily be the same. It's really why that partnership exists, is to tap into slightly different audiences. So again, regularly share it on social. If it's evergreen, you can share it once a year. People won't notice. Really, the world of content is so fast paced in so many ways that obviously we spend a lot of time digesting content and don't think about it. Sometimes if you pay attention to the way in which publishers are using their own content, it works the exact same way. Sometimes you'll click on, you'll see the New Yorker has reshared a piece from 2017, and they did it because it was topical and it worked in that moment again. And there's, it's great, it works for them, and that's what it should do. That's really what native content can really do, is have a lifespan that's quite long. So something that I think I mentioned a second ago is this really taps into this like SEO feedback loop that you want to get a part of. So SEO is search engine optimization. It's the way in which Google and other search engines, index content and assign it like an order of preference, like what is important, because obviously the internet is filled with a bunch of content. So the more you share your native content and link it back to your website, the more search engines will recognize your web properties as important. There's a nice little ecosystem that exists there that really will only help in the long term. It will help with the discoverability of the native content. It will help with the discoverability of your website, of your social media pages if you share it on social media. So again, it's just really nice to keep that sort of marketing mechanism turning. All right, and then there are also extension opportunities that we do through our channels. So one thing that works really great, as I mentioned, with all of this content that is more evergreen, is to use it across different channels. So as you can see in this example, Simone Isolde is a interior designer, and we did a profile for her originally on ruralintelligence.com. And then, sort of had this conversation the team did of like, well, where else could I use this? Where else could this be helpful to people? Where else can I engage with readers? And so we ran the article in Chronogram, in the print issue of Chronogram for January. And it also, that print article comes with a social media campaign. So it gets that sort of add-on effect of also, showing up for people in different channels. And, the person who's going to interact with Rural Intelligence, with Chronogram print, and with Chronogram, social media is not going to be all the same person. It's not going to be the same all age demographics. It's going to tap into different audiences. And that's really where like our suite of publications sort of has that extra oomph, is that we do, talk to a lot of different people. Sometimes they do cross, but sometimes they can be very different. So as I mentioned back at the beginning, we also do native placement through our partner, It's on Target. So this is your native content that you create with Chronogram Media can show up in major publication outlets like People, Time Magazine, Axios. And it has that capability to geo-target it to people in our region. So you're still essentially talking and reaching to a similar people, or you can target it to anywhere you want. If you want to also reach people in California, you can do that. So it's a really great add-on functionality that can really take your native content into the future and bring it to even more people. So video also is an SEO power player. It keeps people on websites longer, they interact with it longer, they're more likely to, listen to and enjoy it for a longer period of time. And it has a really wonderful depth of information that you can receive in a short period of time. So we are also doing a little bit of native video creation that you can sort of add on as well. We can do, interviews and sort of other types of video interaction with people behind your brand, with people who might want to be featured in more than just a print article or digital article version. We can really take advantage of that sort of multimedia. And so those are, just a couple of ways you can extend your native content into the future. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.